We've seen in the last few years pandemics, we've seen things like the climate emergency deepening.
We're having a big crisis in terms of how we live together, how we respect diversity, how we respect others, in terms of inequalities, in terms of our democracies.
We also have inequities around race and culture and language and socioeconomic backgrounds.
We are living in an age of such deep misinformation. Education can be this space where children and adolescents and college students learn to deliberate over very difficult social problems.
I have two kids, 15 and 18 years old. I'm very worried about the kind of world we're living for these kids and to what extent the education they are receiving is giving them the tools to change this world and to make a better world.
Education can't just simply be about giving people qualifications, a cozy life, one which doesn't look at the injustices in the world. It is definitely time to start reconsidering what's the role of schools, what's the role of education, what's the role of lifelong learning in society.
UNESCO has very recently launched a major report in education, reimagining our futures together, a new social contract for education.
We need a fresh vision for education, and this report invites us to consider what that might be.
When you start reading the report, it starts with quite a grim diagnosis of the state of the world. But as you move forward, what really gives me hope is reading in these global documents certain ideas, such as stressing collaboration instead of competition.
The transforming education agenda in this report is the equivalent of moving from an analog world to a digital world. There is a huge emphasis on solidarity, seeing life from other people's perspectives, joining them in working towards more just solutions.
One of the ways that the report is trying to change education is by evoking a great deal of empathy.
The message in the UNESCO report is not only that we need to transform education, but that we really need to think about education as a human right and as something that really represents the way in which we are interconnected and interdependent in an ever-increasing time of precarity in terms of the environment and global health. The brunt is borne most intensely by the most disadvantaged around the world, and so education can play such a powerful role in helping us to solve complex problems. How we educate one population in any part of the world will affect a population in another part of the world in terms of voting behaviors, in terms of support for democratic systems, support for measures to stop the environmental disasters that we're seeing with greater frequency.
There's a lovely line in the report which talks about the need to adapt to mitigate and reverse climate change. That's a really bold statement. The things which we know from the research on effective climate change education is dialogue, democracy, debate, are essential.
I always bet on young people. I don't want to give them the problems that adults have created, but we know that our most powerful social movements around the world throughout history have often been led by young people.
Movements like Black Lives Matter and other protest marches and organizations as well, which have instituted campaigns against the current status quo, are actually drawing attention to some really pivotal, really important aspects within education today. I was part of the old South Africa, where racial tensions divided people. And if I had to think about this UNESCO report, if I had heard about this all those years ago, it would have transformed everything for me, because I would have seen myself being acknowledged in those pages.
We need to change our human narratives. We need to change the way in which we think about our futures and ourselves. And that's why it's very important to promote an education that would allow the next generations to make the kind of changes that we need to create a different world, a world that is sustainable and a world in which human beings can thrive.
We want education to be an empowering, enabling experience for every child so that they are able to rise above and feel equipped to take on the future.
It's time to rethink where education is going. We're now in the 21st century. The way education needs to move into these new times, I think, is really crucial.